Japan, a vibrant and exotic country, teeming with 130 million people, one of the world's most dynamic places. Rich in both culture and technology, Japan inspires unique trends amongst its populace. Trends that explode beyond the confines of its borders. From architecture to cars, Japan has a history of doing things differently, with their desire to bring the future to the present. In 1953, one such organization was born. What began as a small import-export company, Taito, would eventually grow to become an arcade powerhouse worldwide.
タイトは約60年前に誕生しました。最初は、貿易商社です。海外からいろんなものを仕入れてきました。ピンボールゲームとかを輸入してました。そこから経営者、当時の社長が、よしこれはゲームセンターがアメリカにあったように日本でもアーケードが流行るんじゃないかということで自らストアを作り、よしじゃあその次は自分たちでゲームも作っちゃおう。
It was Taito's decision to begin creating their own games that would impact the entertainment industry, putting video games in the spotlight and launching a cultural phenomenon.
1978年にインベーダーは生まれました。プログラマーというかディレクターは、西門と言います。
Tomohiro Nishikado, a designer at Taito, single-handedly created Space Invaders. From the music, the graphics, even the microcomputer that powered the game, his technology would begin an entertainment revolution. Video games had arrived.
I mean, at that time, Space Invaders was like it. It was huge. It was like a national craze, you know? We'd have these like tiny like coffee houses that have been converted into arcades. You could just hear that, you know, that iconic like Space Invaders music, just walking down the street everywhere. Men, women, kids, everyone was playing it. And so I think that, I don't know, I just think that time period is very, very interesting because you have the entire nation just focused on video games, in particular, you know, Space Invaders.
The game was in such high demand that arcades made up of only Space Invader cabinets became popular. These are famously known as Invader houses.
ゲームセンターっていうのはインベーダーもあり他のゲームもありいろんなゲームが50台100台とあるんですけど、もうお客様がインベーダーしかやりたくないって言ってくるんで、もう面倒くさいからこのストア自体インベーダーだけにしちゃおうと言われたのがインベーダーハウス。これも画期的なことです。そうするとそのインベーダーがワンコイン100円ですから100円玉をみんな1日1人の人が10枚も何十枚も使うと。そうすると日本中からもう瞬間風速的に100円玉がなくなっちゃうんですね。で実際に一生懸命日本の銀行が100円玉をいっぱい作った。それはもうデータに表れてる。それも歴史的なレコードだったということです。
It's a huge, huge watershed moment in video games, you know. It laid the precedent for the 1980s, where the 1980s were going to be about shooting games.
Shooting games would build on the basic principles of Space Invaders and continue to bring the player into futuristic worlds filled with aliens and spacecrafts.
俺やっぱシューティングがものすごく好きです。鉄砲を持った人間が走るんじゃなくて未来的な戦闘機が宇宙人に対して鉄砲を撃つようなそういうなんかロマンチックなものなのね。やっぱりこうインベーダーゲームから生まれたのが日本のアーケードゲームなので、このやっぱりゲームっていうと頭の中を思い浮かぶのはなんとなくこう戦闘機が XY 軸上に飛んで押すと弾が出るゲームっていうのがすごくあると思います。
Shooting games flourished through the 80s and into the early 90s. And while the genre isn't as prolific as it once was, in Japan, there remains a dedicated fan base with specialized arcades that cater to them.
ゲームインエビ戦の店長の、エビ店長です。普通の日本のゲームセンターの主流のゲームは一切ない。いわゆるレトロゲームがメインのお店ですね。
Players who find their way into these independently owned arcades will discover an array of games to enjoy and can even select their favorite titles from a selection of classic arcade PCBs.
お客さんがまあそれ見てやりたいゲームがあったら、もうすぐにすぐに交換する。まあこの辺のシューティングゲーム、まあやっぱり縦スクロールのシューティングゲームはすごく人気がある。あとはテトリスかな。
Game in Ebisen isn't your typical Japanese arcade. It caters to your unique demographic of top players who strive to set new high scores and record their best efforts on Superplay DVDs.
基本的にはやっぱりパーセンテージで 90% のお客さんはハードコアハードコアゲーマー、
スコアネームはクローバー TAC という名前で、シューティングゲームを主にプレイしています。まあシューティングゲームのその始祖というか、まあそういうのはそのインベーダーとかそういうところだと思うんですけど、やっぱりまあすごく分かりやすいですよね。誰が見てもその敵を撃ってやっつける、で時期も敵の弾に当たったら爆発して終わる、やられる、ここのルール自体はまあずっと長いこと変わっていないと、まあ、そういうゲームとしての本質的な分かりやすさとかそういうものがまあやっぱりゲームとしてしっかりしてるからじゃないかなと思います。
While the base concepts of these games remain unchanged, the skill level required to play them has become daunting.
Oh, it's just, I mean, you know, if you haven't played the games, it looks easy. I mean, no matter what it is, but if you know the game and you know how, you know, controller breaking frustration is induced in these things sometimes, and you watch them do it, I mean, you're just like, oh wow. And at times you're like, oh that's how you did it. And then other times you're just like, well, I might as well give up. There's no way I'm going to do that.
こんぐらいでいいやみたいな適当なところはどこにもない。ものすごいきっちり詰めていく。
The countless hours players like Clover TAC spend learning these games makes the most difficult look easy. But when you're chasing that next high score, nerves begin to play a part.
そうですね、プレッシャーはやっぱりすごいですけど、まあやっぱりゲームが始まってしまえばなんかそんなに気にならないし、結局いつもできることしかできない、まあ試験とかでも入試とかテストとかでもそうですけど、その時にいきなりすごいことをやろうとしても絶対できないんで、まあ、結局いつも通りのことをやるだけっていう風にはなりますね。
It is the mindset of these players that make them unique. They are not competing head to head. It is all about challenging yourself and besting your personal goals.
今最近のなんだろうな、シューティングゲームのトッププレイヤーたち大体みんなそうなんですけれども、単純に球を避けるのがうまいとかその瞬間的なインスピレーションっていうよりはもっとみんな理論的なんですよね。すっごい細かい理論の積み重ねで偶然スコアが出るってことはない。出すべくして出す、そういうきめ細かさはありますね。もちろんクローバー TAC も。
Arcades are like a second home to many of these high score holders. But it costs more than a few hundred yen to become a top player. The real price is dedication.
You know, these guys are, they're unbelievable. They asked him how much point blank did you spend. It was Mushihime Samaputari, which is the ultra mode. It's unbelievable. Most people can't get past the first stage, and he clears the whole thing. They asked him point blank, how much did you spend? And he said the first month about 150,000 yen. And I'm not sure if that was standard credits of 100 yen, that's 1,500 credits in a month. So these guys, obviously they've kind of taken the hobby to an extreme. It's probably gone a little beyond hobby.
Arcade gaming can certainly lead to some degree of fame. And in certain circles, many of these names are synonymous with greatness.
もちろん覚えてる。クローバー TAC がエビセンに初めて来た時、なるくんっていうまあやっぱりトッププレイヤーのシューティングすごい上手いトッププレイヤーの子がいるんですけど、その人が連れてきてくれたの。もう最初からすっごい上手かった。こいつはちょっと違うぞと。
It is under Ebihara's watchful eye that world records are set and broken. The walls are lined with the current high scores of its resident players, and 20-year-old notebooks show the history and evolution of these scores. Arcadia Magazine, a monthly publication which focuses on arcade culture, documents the high scores from all over Japan.
そうですね、初めて自分がその雑誌に載った全国トップのスコアを出したゲームがエスプレイドっていうゲームがあって、今出してるスコアの方がその自分が初めて出した当時より高いスコア自体は出てますけど、やっぱりその当時出したそのスコアの時の方が印象として強く残ってますし、すごい嬉しかったのを覚えてます。一番最近は、赤い刀っていうゲーム、確か4億3000万ぐらいのスコアだったと思います。
The thing that's really interesting about shooting games as they evolved is that in many ways they became almost less about shooting and more about dodging. And so I think that when you go back and you play, Space Invaders, it's very different from the shooting games that are being made now. You can see there's a connection, there's an arc, there's an evolution, but they're different, and they've changed. The guy who created Space Invaders told me, he's like I can't even play shooting games now. He's like, it's unnerving. In the 90s, you started seeing kind of more and more extreme shooting games, where in Japanese they're called danmaku shooters, shooting games, right? And that means just like a hail of bullets, and that's what they were. I mean, where it became like how many projectiles they could get on the screen at one time.
As more and more games rode the success of Space Invaders, designers needed to find ways to entice new players to drop their 100-yen coins. As game design evolved, arcade companies became aware of certain criteria that seemed to be working.
ゲームセンターのゲームを動かして1回100円っていう形で遊ばせてあげて、それで利益を上げると。でユーザーは100円払って遊ぶというので、一種の時間貸し、時間何分間をそのお金で遊ばせてあげますよっていう考え方なんですね。なので基本的には一つのゲームは30分前後で終わることっていうのをまず考えてると、もう一つが100円を出した人が、簡単に言うと3分でも1分でもいいんですけど、それで満足するっていう作り方をしたり、つまり RPG のような伏線を張ってストーリーを楽しんで、もう最後のボス行くまでにいろんなイベントがあってというような作り方は NG ダメなんですね。100円の100円を入れて最初の3分間ぐらいを考えて、それ3分間ぐらいいくんですけど、3分間でもうこれだけ遊べますよっていうことをいきなり示さないといけない。だからいきなりクライマックスっていうような感じでゲームを作ってる。でだけどもう一つが100円を入れた人が全部遊んでしまって、もういいや、もうやらないって言われたら終わってしまうので、またやりたいと思わせるようにクライマックスを遊んでるんだけど、そのクライマックスを遊んだだけでは全部遊び尽くしてなくて、まだあるよ、まだそこがあるよというような形のゲームの作り方をしなきゃいけないっていう感じですね。だからそういう考え方でゲームを作る。
With these ideas in mind, arcade games would continue to coax the 100-yen coins from casual and hardcore gamers alike.
The idea that people walk into an arcade and they're paying a machine money, and they are doing everything that they can to not die so they don't lose their money, I think it's very, very profound. And it's becoming increasingly profound in an age where, you buy a video game and it's 8, 9, 10 hours long and you play it. Maybe you don't finish it, who cares? Then you diddle around on the multiplayer and you're happy. This is different, this is very, very different, where it's like you have this coin and you want to win and you want to keep playing, you don't want to die. The stakes are higher, much higher.
It became harder and harder to attract clients to the same gimmick. Shooting games would soon take a back seat as arcade gaming needed its next big change.
これまでのゲームっていうのはご商売でいうと、これはとっても面白いので100円取って返さないけど3分間遊ばせてあげますよっていう、そういう仕組みだった。でもスト2はこれが根底から実は違っていて、あなたと隣のあなたが一種の100円かけて戦ってください。もう負けたらもう100円取られますけど悔しいよな、さあもっとお金あげてっていう、こんな仕組みはこれまでになかったので、もちろんやったら面白かったし、あとねお金の流れも全く違っちゃった。 だから「ストリートファイター2」を見てみると歴史の時間でね大絶滅ってあるでしょ。ある時を境にアンモナイトが全く出なくなるとか恐竜がなくなるとか、あんな感じで「ストリートファイター2」っていうのはそれまでの僕らが大好きだったシューティングとかのアーケードゲームをちょっと絶滅させちゃった、それぐらいのパラダイムシフトだったと思います。
And so began the era of fighting games. Instead of battling the computer's AI, players were pitted head to head against each other, creating a new dynamic, which revitalized arcades in a big way.
格闘ゲームがやっぱ好きだったのはやっぱ爽快感があるんで、やっぱただ単に運動とかじゃなくて頭で考えながら読み合いっていうのが今までそういうのがなかったんで、ちょっとこれ知能戦だなって思って結構ハマりましたね。多分これ友達作ったらもっとこう面白くなるんじゃないかなみたいな、まあ一つのコミュニケーションって考えていただければいいかなと思います。
This social atmosphere of fighting games would breed a new type of community within the arcades. The joy of winning and frustration of losing is amplified 10 times when competing against a human opponent. Daigo Umehara is among the world's elite fighting game players and has made a career out of dominating his opponents.
趣味ゲームずっとゲームだったんですけど、今は趣味と呼べるかどうかわからないですけど、初めてゲームをプレイしたところは、レンタルビデオショップだったんだけど、そこには、姉と一緒にビデオを借りに行って、その時に初めてアーケードゲームを見て、それがきっかけです。14歳から22歳ぐらいまではもうものすごく一生懸命やってて、で23歳から27歳ぐらいまであまりゲームやってなかった。でストリートファイター4が出てまたたくさんゲームをやるようになりました。
From these humble beginnings in video rental stores, Daigo would become one of, if not the most accomplished arcade gamer in the world.
やっぱ一番その 2D の中では一番上なのはやはり梅原選手。やっぱ戦歴も残してるし、また各世界大会の方もやっぱなんて言ったらいいんですかね、こう歴戦とかやっぱ戦績をきちんと残してる上でやっぱ認められてる上でのやっぱ選手だと思いますので、 2D ではやっぱり梅原選手ですね。
What is it about this type of competition that attracts so many gamers? And what makes a top fighting game player?
まあやっぱり人と人とのなんかコミュニケーション的なところだと思います。相手がそのコンピューターじゃないんで、そこら辺が面白い部分かなと思います。いや、自分ではよくわからないんですけど、ただその子供の頃からちょっと理解力はある方かなとは思ってたので、まあ、それがゲームに生きてるのかもしれませんね。まあ、あまりもともとあったわけではないと思います。やっぱゲームをやってってゲームを理解してって、まあそれで多分こういうスキルが身についたんじゃないかなっていうふうに思います。
We see a common thread between professionals of both shooting and fighting games. To dominate the field, there is a significant cost.
1ヶ月、その若い頃10代の頃は1月に6万円ぐらい多分ゲームにお金使ってました。一番やってる頃は1週間全部子供の頃はもうすごい緊張してましたね。もう緊張で手がこう震えちゃってなかなかうまく操作できなかったり。でも10代半ば17歳かそれぐらいになったらかなり大きな大会でもしっかり動けるようになってきましたね。今はもう大会でもあんまり緊張しない。
You can't be at the top of the leaderboard this long without garnering a reputation. Some would call it fame, others infamy.
I guess, that everybody knows him as the Beast, and that's exactly what he is. I see that he invested in a pair of headphones now while he's playing, so he's probably just listening to his own voice telling himself, I am the Beast, I am the Beast, like over and over again.
そうですね。自分で後からたまに自分のゲームしてる時の顔を見て怖いなって思う時がありますね。なんでですかね。なんで 無表情なんだろうな。子供の頃から結構顔に出さない、いろんなこと顔に出さない子供だったから、それでゲームもプレイ中はあんまり表情がないのかもしれない。
He's amazing. He's definitely probably the best Street Fighter player of all time.
梅原君は特にゲームがうまいというよりもゲームをうまくしようとする努力することがうまいっていうか、そういうところの差が孫君や梅原君はやっぱりすごいなと感動します。
少ない数で上手くなるのであればゲームセンターで練習した方がいいと思います。それはなぜならばやはりゲームセンターはそのワンプレイするのにお金を払わなきゃいけないので、そのプレイについて結構考えると思うんですよ。なのでまあ家庭用ゲームとかだと1回負けても別にいいんかっていうふうに思うんですけど、でもゲームセンターだとそういうのがちょっと薄れるので、まあ結構真剣にやるんじゃないかなっていう部分でゲームセンターの方が練習にはなると思います。
This arcade community isn't made up of just teenagers. Men and women of all ages spend hours enjoying their favorite games.
Everyone's there. Like there are people in like little kids. They're like people in like business outfits. They just came from work. Older people from like age range is probably from 18 to probably like 45. And they're all really good at fighting games. They all practice really hard and they want to be the best. Pride is very important in Japan. So that's why their community is so strong, because they always want to be number one. And there's like different machines where, okay, like there's probably like 4 machines here and 4 machines right here for Street Fighter. And then the first 4 are like top players' machines, and the other 4 is like for mediocre players. So people got to work up the levels to make sure they can play in the first 4 machines, because that's where all the top dogs play. So that's like, it's really unique how there's like a system like that, because everyone here, they just want to play everyone and like, oh, that's fun games. But in Japan, it's like, it's not fun. It's our life to be the best.
日本だと家が狭いのでマンションだとやっぱり騒げないっていう人が多くて、ゲームセンターでみんなでワイワイ騒ぐっていうのが結構主流なんだと思いますね。ゲームセンター、日本のゲームセンターは本当にうるさいです。いい意味でうるさいですね。
僕の周りの人たちはもちろんゲームが好きなんだけど、ほとんどの人は友達に会いに来てる。いつも行くゲームセンターに行けば友達に会えるから、それが目的でゲームセンターに行く人たちが日本では多いですね。それが海外のゲームセンターとはちょっと違うかもしれない。
私はそのゲームセンターで働いていて、まあその時にゲームセンターの友達っていうのが、すぐゲームやっぱりゲームをする人ってなかなかそのゲームセンター同士でしょっちゅう顔を合わせますので仲良くなるんですけれども、その人を通じて今結婚しました。はい。
The social aspect of Japanese arcades is what keeps them going, whereas in America, that social foundation has become relegated to basements and niche gaming tournaments.
It's weird because there's people who are probably going to be watching this that don't even know really what the arcade scene was like, you know, and I don't even know how to begin to describe it to them because all they know is the internet and online. And I mean, online stuff can be fun, you know, we all do it, I guess, you know, so we know it's good stuff, but missing that interaction of actually meeting up in the arcade and being next to the person who you don't know but you just want to beat them and smash on them, it's an experience, like you don't get that online and you can't get that online. Social aspect is probably 80% of it, I would say, you know. In the beginning it wasn't, you know, but it's like once you've already been playing a lot and you kind of know where you stand, then it all becomes pretty much a social aspect. And then it's like, oh yeah, I forgot I have to play in top 8 now, you know. It's like I totally forgot about that. I was having fun just chilling in the back talking to everybody, joking and having fun, and then the tournament's just like the side part of it.
僕から見たゲームセンター、そのファイティングゲームのコーナーの雰囲気っていうのは本当にそれぞれの条件があって、例えば友達と会って一緒に遊ぶ一つのコミュニケーションの場、交流の場で、または強い人を求めてまたちょっとこの人を倒すから一度変えようっていう人の場、またはそれ以外にもこうイベントがあるし、またこうちょっと練習もしたいから 行ける場っていうのはいろいろとあると思うんですけれども、やっぱ一番分かりやすく言うんであればやっぱお祭りが好き、また一つのコミュニケーションでやっぱ友達を作る、またそこでやっぱ戦友って言ったらいいんですかね、やっぱゲーム作る友達としてやっぱ戦友を作る場のコミュニケーションとしてやっぱそういう雰囲気が感じられるかなって思います。
ちょっとマニアックな雰囲気があるかもしれないです。その UFO キャッチャーとか簡単にできるゲームだとそうでもないのかもしれないんですけど、格闘ゲームはちょっと難しいところも奥が深いというかところもあるんで、ちょっとマニアックな雰囲気があると思います。
The fighting game genre has a very dedicated fan base. But as arcades continue to grow, an important goal was to connect with a larger core group of gamers. The soundtracks to these games create immersive experiences, which fuel many of our nostalgic memories. This musical influence would spark the next big shift in arcade gaming.
セガに入ってですね、サウンドの仕事をしてます。ヒロです。主にアーケードゲームの方の音楽だったり効果音だったりの制作をしてますね。作品的には、かれこれ20年ぐらい前のですね、ハングオンとかアウトランとか、アフターバーナーだったりスペースハリアーなどのそこにある体感ゲームと言われたこうゲームをするとこう動くようなゲームですね。そういうやつの音楽を作ってました。新しい一ジャンルを築いたゲームだと思いますね。今まであったようなこう格闘とかドライブゲームとかそういうのとまた別のベクトルを持ったゲームだと思います。でその音楽をメインにしてそれをもとに、お客さんに楽しませるっていうのは、まあ、とても斬新な試みで面白いと思います。
These music or rhythm games would reignite people's passion for arcade gaming and appeal to the next generation of up-and-coming gamers.
本名は森友之と言います。ゲームの名前だと悪代官っていう名前で、今やってるのは DDR、 あと最近フォースライダースっていうのをアーケードではそれをやってますね。連れられてその千葉の方のゲーセンに行ったんだけど、その時にまだ DDR ほとんど全然知らなくて、ビートマニア5鍵の方のビートマニアがあったのを覚えてます。それでちょっとやり始めてなんかこれ結構面白いななんて言ってた頃に別の知り合いの子から「いやそれよりもっと面白いのがあるの?」って言って連れてかれたのがその DDR で、なんか指でやるより足でこうやる方が俺いいかもしんないとか言ってそっちに行っちゃったっていう。
You know, like on player pianos, when they have the score rolling up, music games are like the video game equivalent of that. Whereas instead of like the score being produced by a machine, you know, piano, you are responsible for sequencing those notes.
And as the music genre grew, its audience became more and more prolific, commanding larger sections of the arcade devoted to these games.
When DDR started to expand in popularity in the late 90s, particularly 98 and early 99, there were machines everywhere. I mean, in the rural regions, in Tokyo, just everywhere. Even in places that should not have any business owning an arcade machine had one. And I remember the one that stuck out the most was a coin laundry in the city of Matsumoto down in Nagano-ken that actually had one there. And what's the relationship? You wait and you dance while your laundry dries or washes or whatever. It was a very bizarre thing to see. But it was still getting traffic as well. People were going there to play DDR. I thought that was really bizarre.
音楽ゲームをやり始めたきっかけは、東京ゲームショウに行った時に1999年の東京ゲームショウに行った時にダンスダンスレボリューションの家庭用が出ていて、それをちょっと試しに遊んでみるかとやってみたらすごく面白くて、そこからハマりました。
Once Dance Dance Revolution became available for home console, the future of arcades looked grim. If this unique experience can be replicated in the comfort of your own home, why bother going to an arcade?
今はプレイステーションとか XBOX でダンスダンスレボリューションとかっていっぱい出てるんですけど、やっぱり日本の住宅を考えるとあまりそのドタバタ動いたりとか、あまりその人を呼んでワイワイやったりっていうのがすごくやりにくいので、家でやる時とゲームセンターでやる時っていうのは全然違くて、やっぱり人前でやったりしたい時はゲームセンターに来ます。 当時そのやっぱりダンスダンスレボリューションを同じゲームセンターでやる仲間っていうのはやっぱり同じところにいる関係上すぐ仲良くなっちゃうっていうのがありまして、それでいっぱい友達ができたりして、地域ごとになんかいろんな組というかそういうコミュニティが出来上がっていて楽しかったです。
The popularity of rhythm games in Japan would foster the growth of a skilled community of players who would quickly master the intricacies of the genre.
何でもそうなんですけど、日本語で難しい言葉では攻略法っていうのがあるので、例えば矢印一つにしてもマーベラスをそれ一個一個どういうふうに踏めばいいか、曲によっては全部の矢印が同じタイミングで踏めるものではない場合もあるので、たまにフェイントで1個だけそのマーベラスの場所がポイントが違うとかっていうのがあったりとか、たまにそういうのがあるので、そういうのも含めて全部攻略をしていけるかどうかですよね。あとはもう本当にやり込んで自分の体をそれに合わせて作っていくっていうところなんでしょうね。
The physical interaction that these games demand is a unique feature which attracts players for fitness reasons as much as for gameplay.
少なくとも俺はDDR っていうのはスキーとかバドミントンと同じやろうと思えば一生できるスポーツであるというふうに思うんです。でアメリカでもね肥満対策でDDR 学校とかで取り沙汰されてるのもあるし、で年44ですけどそれより年齢上の人50代の人も知ってます。で今全国でも知られている人で有名なご夫婦でご主人が確か70超えてる方もご夫婦もいらっしゃって、その方たちは健康のために毎日少しずつっていう、やっぱり足を動かして体を動かしてっていう形なので、ある種スポーツとしては結構健康のためっていうのはいいんじゃないかなと思って。
While it may look easy, as with shooting games and fighting games, countless hours are spent perfecting these skills. Rhythm games, at their highest level, are a serious business.
In terms of the easiest settings, you may have 50 steps, maybe even less than that on the easier songs, because it's basically one step every few beats, or so to speak. I mean, even somebody who's not familiar with the game can keep up. Oh, look, there's a single arrow. I wonder what's happening then. Oh, I get it now. But if you put that up to the extreme settings, I mean, the highest level difficulty, you're bordering on 700 steps in the span of 1.5 to 2 minutes. And that's just crazy. I mean, to the casual person watching, they have no idea what's going on. It's just a huge blur. And it's not just with DDR as well. I mean, with the other music games, it's the same thing. I mean, you may have a series of columns coming down the screen or other icons, and you get them dense enough, nobody can read what's going on except somebody who's practiced it at such a level that they know what to expect. It's amusing for me personally to be able to do these things now that years ago, just watching them would make me go, wow, how did he do that? I mean, to be able to do that or perform at the same level is a very nice feeling. I mean, and to this day, even with over at this time 1,200 perfect scores over the DDR mixes, single, double, all the different modes, it's still nice to be able to get a full perfect combo or whatever. Just see that little flash, the flare at the end, look that. It's a cheap thrill to see that. I still get a kick out of that to this day, even on something that's not necessarily that difficult.
You know, for foreigners, I'm sure Aaron's probably the best, so it's kind of like you see the big names and you see the big names at your local arcade, and if you see somebody at your local arcade that has, a top ranking, then that's kind of impressive.
Impressive to say the least. Aaron has helped create an online community for these games, sharing news and high scores from Japan via a popular web forum dedicated to rhythm games. Aaron and his close friends have been invited to travel to compete and showcase their abilities internationally.
See his name on the high score when you start a song, you know he's got to be pretty good. I mean, it's not easy to rank in the machines.
Part of the reason that I can get perfect scores is that I zone out. I mean, you lose yourself in the music, you focus on the beat, you focus on the patterns coming, you try not to worry about distractions or your score or anything along that nature. Just keep it going, because a great at the beginning of the song is the same as a great at the end of the song. It'll destroy your full perfect combo at the time. With the very first mixes of the music games were, I wouldn't say difficult at all, at least not in comparison to today's standards. So what was difficult back then is, well, a cakewalk in comparison today, partially because at the time nobody was used to the music genre. This was all new. I mean, just doing anything was a challenge.
So once everybody got used to that, you had to ramp up the difficulty, so to speak. So at the time, there was a novelty to the music game genre. It was fun because those challenges were there because it was a unique experience. Whereas nowadays, the challenge is there because people already know the basics. They just want to push themselves to new limits.
The Japanese have been pushing the limits of gaming for the last 40 years. But at the end of the day, it's the social climate, the community, that keeps people coming back to arcades.
やっぱりそのスコアを頑張る目的としてはやっぱりいろんな人と戦って、いい勝負をすることで、いろんなライバルとか仲間を増やしていきたいっていうのがありますね。実際スコアをいっぱいやってきたおかげで日本全国のいろんな友達ができましたし、そういう意味ではスコアを目指すというよりも友達を増やしたいっていう気持ちが強いです。
For most genres, high score is kind of dead, but for some things like music games and shooting games, it's still very much competitive. I think that Japanese arcades are just more about just, going out and just having fun. It's still a better image than in America, where it's kind of like, you play Nintendo all day from your mom's basement, and then you go and play some other game. I think Japan is slightly better in that respect.
North America saw a similar rise to arcades in the 1980s, following the Space Invader craze, led by games like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man.
My first arcade experience was probably when I was 8 years old in New York City. Went to an arcade called Chinatown Fair. There was a lot of people in there. I saw these arcade cabinets. There was like Pac-Man, or like Gladius, or like random shooting games, really old school games like Donkey Kong. None of the newest technology games, but mainly just like the Mortal Kombat phase, Street Fighter phase, Killer Instincts, basically like the Super Nintendo / Genesis generation. So I always went back to arcade like almost every day, just playing like all these different types of games. Like it could be like action, platformer, or like a random fighting game, or even like a driving game. So I played all those type of games at my local arcade.
Arcade culture is a staple for many childhood memories for adults in North America. This influence has created a burgeoning field of rising professional gamers who grew up in these establishments and are working to bring them back to life.
I mean, I've been gaming since a very, very early age, like literally since before I can remember, I've been playing games. My first video game experience was versus Super Mario Brothers, which is the arcade version of, what eventually became the home console version of Super Mario Brothers. I was 1 year old when I played that arcade game, and my parents would stack up milk cartons at the convenience store where the arcade machine was. Lived in a very small town at this time, so the convenience store was like, where the new arcade games were at.
These experiences represent a growing population of gamers eager to relive their childhood memories.
Oh, arcades. When I first started going, probably like 5. And I used to have to get on little short stepping ladders to reach the top of the joysticks and stuff like that. And I've been hooked with arcades ever since. But I was playing pretty much every game, whatever they had, whatever I could reach, however much money I had left on me, how many quarters I had, that's just what I played with.
My parents would drop me off, I would walk in, and the arcade that was local to my house, called Pirates Cove in Monterey Park, had like a dozen Street Fighter 2 machines. So you would walk in and you would just see everybody playing. And I was just a kid, so I wasn't any good, but I was old enough to understand, hey, this is pretty cool. And so I guess that's just something that's kind of stuck with me through the years, just because it's always been there and it's always been fun.
While we all think back on our first arcade experiences with fond memories, the reality was that in North America, the reputation of arcades was far from pristine.
I think the first word that comes to mind is dark. Quite dark, just lit up by all the different monitors, different electronic sounds. As a kid, it was very, very appealing to go to somewhere like that where all the adults were playing something that you wouldn't have a chance to play at home. And I think it was at a time when arcades were kind of negatively looked upon. It's like a place where delinquents or those kind of go there. Obviously, it's tough when you're 12 versus people who are in their 20s who have more money and go play wherever they want to.
In the West, if you want to go to an arcade and you're under 18, or under 16, you probably need your mom or your dad to drive you to the arcade. And then you're gonna have your mom and dad drive you back home. So it's a terrible place to go for a date.
This negative image, alongside a lack of accessibility, led to a swift decline in popularity. By the late 90s, arcades had become scarce.
I guess like one of the things living in Japan that if you like video games, you notice very quickly is that they still have arcades. And growing up in Texas, I went to my local arcade a lot. But by the time that I was a teenager and was going to college, those arcades started to disappear. So I think that kind of nostalgia, that feeling that that this is something I used to do when I was a kid, and it doesn't exist anymore, but it still exists in Japan. And you can walk down the street and you can find a great arcade and play a bunch of games.
While it remains difficult to find an arcade in North America, in Japan, they're hard to ignore. Gaming is part of their everyday life. It's part of their culture.
The companies that make arcade games are Japanese, so there's that. It kind of exists. And granted, you had that in America as well. You had American companies making arcade games, but then a lot of the I guess American game development moved more and more towards PC. So you kind of have that really strong backbone in Japan. The other thing is that you have the locations. Like Sega not only makes arcade games, they own arcades. A lot of arcade developers that are like that. So you have this kind of I guess system already in place. Another reason is that you have population density. That in the sense that if you get off at a train station, you can probably walk to an arcade. In the US, you'd have to get in a car and drive usually, unless you lived in, for example, New York City or someplace like that. But generally, you'd have to drive. And so why drive somewhere when you can play a video game at home? Kind of, I guess that kind of situation really hurt arcades in the US.
So while there is clearly something to be said for the location and access, this isn't the sole reason for arcades failing in the Western world. Some would say that the arcades simply didn't grow up.
Some arcades have not really adapted and evolved and changed. It's still pretty much put a quarter in to play. And I mean, it's kind of like a very old business model, Not playing games at a public place, that's obviously something that is going to continue in the future. But the actual idea of putting a physical coin into a machine to play until you die is kind of an idea that somebody came up with, 30, 40 years ago now. That's part of why they're dying.
In Japan, gaming is accepted, and I think in the States, it's accepted as simply a time-wasting hobby. And I think it's anything but that. Arcades didn't necessarily die, they just didn't grow up. They were always focusing on basically teenagers.
And when you focus on the youth of America, you better have a positive influence. Otherwise, Uncle Sam is coming for you.
The US government is like, arcades are bad. They make our little kids do drugs and kill people. You have movies like Saw. You don't think a person would do that when they see Saw, but you think, someone punching in the face with Ryu can make someone kill someone. That's kind of dumb. The US government does not like arcades, and that's why arcade scenes are dying, and it's so hard for arcades to open up a license there because the government is so strict.
There's just this stigma that I'm hoping that we can eradicate and showing the popularity of video games.
So while Americans fight strict regulations and societal pressure, in Japan, game companies flourish with free rein to innovate and design meaningful games for all audiences.
I think games mean more to more people in Japan than they do in America. I think games in Japan early on, they were made to appeal to many people. For example, Pac-Man designer, Toru Iwatani, he intentionally made Pac-Man not a game about shooting aliens or not a game about playing tennis, more about just this kind of wacky, cool, stylized character who goes around eating things, which I think I've heard that he made that specifically to appeal to more to women, actually. When traditionally most of the arcade games were famously, alien shooters. We'll even have a game geared towards, like 50-year-old housewives, basically, who like Korean idols. They have a special pachinko game themed with Yon-sama. which I think you won't get in America anytime soon.
Instead, American arcades were forced to shift gears, becoming quote-unquote family-friendly locations in an attempt to reach a larger audience.
In the 80s, it was that stigma of the arcades being a negative place to go to that arcade owners changed their whole perspectives. Like, well, we don't want to be thought of like as D&D was back in the early 80s as some kind of negative influence on kids. We want a happy family type of place. So you have like the Dave & Buster's who catered to adults. You have a family fun center to cater to the whole family. Or like the golf lands in California. I think it was just to bring in more people and to say like, well, the video games, they're not bad. These are places where everyone can enjoy them. And then that's really, we saw that shift to that kind of model. I would say the arcade is not relevant, really, to the family of today in America.
Like, we had these grimy arcades, and then, you know, Chuck E. Cheese started taking over, or, you know, sort of eating up these smaller mom-and-pop places. And, you know, some of the experience is lost in those kind of places, in my humble opinion.
The layout and design of arcades in Japan is another potential reason for their continued success. Multiple floors divide up game types, ensuring the best experience possible for a wide array of players.
When I first walk into an arcade, I usually will not see the music games there per se. I'll usually see the UFO catchers first before I see anything. And then around there, I'll see fighting and racing games off to the side, the horse race simulators, the mahjong games, and all the other bizarre ones off to a side, along with the bingo machines and the metal games, all of those. Music games tend to be in a corner or in some, I wouldn't say isolated, but some set-back place of the arcade. Not because the staff necessarily wants to hide them, but because they are very loud, let's be honest. They're blaring music at you. And it can be distracting to other players, especially when you have a number of these machines blaring out in the arcades.
ゲームセンターの環境は結構BGM もお店の BGM もなってますし、いろんなゲームがあるので、これの騒音問題っていうのはずっと最初からありましたね。でもその中でどうやって工夫していくかというと、やっぱりこうスピーカーの位置を耳の近くに置いたりとか、もしくは指向性スピーカーをこう置いて自分にしか聞こえないようなシステムを作ったりとかですね。あとはゲームのセンターの中で埋もれないためには逆にあまり音を出さないっていうのも大事なんですね。全部が出てると何を聞かせたいのかわからない。なので出すところは出して出さないところは出さない。そこら辺のメリハリをつけることが、ユーザーに一番伝えられる方法かなと思ってますね。
With nothing left to chance, it is apparent that the design of these arcades are thought out to the very last detail. Ultimately, it is about creating a space that caters to their clientele.
もうサービスしたくてたまらない。でゲームセンターでそこら辺にあるでしょ。もうとにかくあんた今寂しくないかなんか楽しいことないかってしたくてたまらないのね。で多分そこら辺のサービス大好き文化っていうのがこのちっちゃなゲームセンターをいまだに根付かせていてやるんじゃないかとちょっと思います。やっぱりねアメリカ例えば行ってゲームセンター行くとねなんか大抵店長がこんな面してんのね。もう遊んでみたいな。でも日本はね給料変わんないのにじゃあ面白いとか言ってねお金出ないのにね。なんかそういった人を面白がらせてなんかちょっと喜ぶような文化があるのかなとかちょっと思ったり。
The staff are so orderly and it's almost like you're in a casino. They have like proper attire, you know, like a suit tie or a waistcoat and stuff. They look really smart and they're very attentive and they're actually really good at the games. They're not just people walking around cleaning machines. These guys are really top players. Like they can do all the really good combos and stuff like that. I never forget a time when I was there for Virtua Fighter in 1998. And one of the buttons went out on Virtua Fighter, so I asked the guy if he could repair it. And this guy sits down, repairs the button, puts a credit in, and proceeds to like completely batter the opponent by doing all these really stylish combos. And he gets up and he's like, yeah, the button's working now. Just when I saw that, I was really impressed with how they actually make effort to employ people genuinely interested in games, and it's not just someone trying to make a quick buck doing any job. And I like that.
働いてる時はすごく楽しくて、もうゲームを見ながらその仕事ができるので楽しくて。でそのゲーム好きなお客さんが来るわけなんで、そのお客さんともやっぱり話が合うんで、だからすごくやりがいのある楽しい仕事でした。
Much like casinos, Japan's arcades are designed to draw you in and keep you entertained. The hardest part is attracting the mass foot traffic into your establishment. Fortunately, Japan's arcades are built around that very goal.
入り口の近くは UFO キャッチャー、それが一番お客さんがいっぱいいるから UFO キャッチャーは入り口のそばにいっぱいあって、あと音ゲービートマニアとか太鼓の達人とか、まあそういうゲームセンターにあまり来ない人たちでも楽しめるようなゲームは入り口のそばに置いてありますね。それで地下は、大型のゲーム、競馬ゲームだったりサッカーゲームだったり、まあ、地下にあることが多いです。で上に上がっていくにつれてメダルゲームだったりで、大体最上階がビデオゲームですね。だから多分ゲームが好きな人ほど上の階に行くっていう感じですね。あまりゲームを普段しない人たちは1階、ゲームが好きな人につれてどんどん上に行くっていうのがゲームセンターの作りになってます。
Even in Japan, we see a shift in business models, with places like Round One becoming major players in the arcade industry. Instead of a traditional arcade, at Round One, you pay by the hour. And you also have access to activities like billiards, bowling, volleyball courts, or batting cages.
Round 1, for example, is open until 5 a.m. It's accessible by walking or by train. They have alcohol there. They have food there. You don't really have to leave anytime soon. So I think for me, why Round 1 can exist is because it's so accessible. I'll go to an arcade because it's in downtown area. So, you know, you go drinking, and then after that you go to Round 1 to sing karaoke, and then you just play some arcade games or something. Or for example, you go watch a movie, and then they have this giant amusement center right next to the movie theater, so you can go, you know, spend a good productive 2 hours, you know, playing whatever you want.
ラウンドワンさんみたいな感じのが多分今みんな遊びやすいんで、最終的にはやっぱそうなるんじゃないかなっていうのはあるんですけれども、まあうちのやっぱセガとしても、まあもしかしたら今以上にもうちょっと普通のお客様またはまあご年配の方も気軽に遊べるようなやっぱ娯楽施設を作るように努力していければいいかなっていうふうに思います。
So while arcades look for a way to stay relevant, consoles continue to improve, and the home gaming market continues to grow.
で家庭用のゲームがすごく今出来がいいというか優秀なんで、ゲームセンターがこれから増えたり流行ったりするのはすごく大変な時代だろうなと思いますけど。
だからやっぱり皆さんおっしゃってますけども Wii が出てからゲーセンって意味なくなったよねってその通りだと思います。みんな例えば友達集まったら Wii でボーリングとかやってるからね。だから一番最初の意味でのゲームセンターっていうのはちょっともう単純に負けてると思います。でも今ゲーセン行かれたら分かると思うんですけども、ほとんど1階のプリクラと2階のカードゲームで回ってるんですね。Wii が来た時に実はこれでアーケードが終わりだなってこう商売的には思ったんですけども、内容的にはあんまり、まあでも実際もうそれとは違うところにゲームセンターもなってしまってるしっていうのが大きいと思います。
It's fair to say that Japan's arcades rely on things like crane games and purikura to carry their business year to year. This maintains profitability while waiting for the next big game to arrive. It's the small retro arcades that struggle to maintain a large enough customer base with the influx of consoles.
まあ正直ここのエビセンさんみたいなそういう個人経営でビデオゲーム中心っていうところはまあちょっと厳しい状況かなというのが正直なところですね。それはまあよく言われることですけど、家庭用ゲームの性能が上がってきて、もう昔は逆だったんですけど、アーケードじゃなきゃできないゲームっていうのがいっぱいあったけど、今ではもうむしろ家庭用ゲームの方が性能がいいからもうゲームセンターに行く理由がないとか、そういうところもありますし、あとはまあ麻雀ファイトクラブとかそういう人気のある大型のゲームっていうのはやっぱりちょっと値段が高くて、そういう個人のところが入れるにはまあちょっと厳しいと。
他の国に比べればゲームセンターの数は多いけど、でも10年前に比べるとやっぱりすごい数が減ってますね。でやっぱり UFO キャッチャーとか音ゲームとかそういうのばっかりになっちゃうんじゃないかなと。何かゲームセンターでしかできないような工夫が ないと格闘ゲームとかそういうゲームはなくなっちゃうんじゃないかなと思いますね。
今後どうなるかっていうと全く予測ができない。やっぱりコンソールのゲームがすごい充実してくるとコンソールにないものをやっぱしみんな求めてアーケードに来るので、一つはコミュニケーションなんだろうけどもやっぱし新技術新しいものを求めてくると思うんで、新しい技術だからね想像はつかない。もしそういうものが出たらまたアーケードに人がたくさん来るだろうし、そういうものがなかったらちょっとずつ人は減っていくんじゃないかなと思う。
While the future is uncertain, there remains a unique appeal to arcades that is hard to argue.
There's something to be said about walking into a game center, sitting down at a cabinet, knowing on the other side there's a real person. And that takes a certain degree of, I don't know, bravery, because you might get your ass handed to you. You may destroy the other person. It's that kind of uncertainty. And if you're playing online, you start getting your butt kicked, you can just rage quit, turn off the machine. You can't do that in an arcade.
今のゲームセンター正直やっぱ厳しいっていうのはあるんですけれども、ただ厳しいからって言ってそこで諦めるんじゃなくて、じゃあお客さんを取り込むまたは顧客を作るためにはどうやったらいいかっていう風でやっぱ毎日考えながらやっぱやってますね。
It doesn't have to just be 400 machines all stuck together and a bunch of people crammed in one area. Open it up, just make it more accessible to not just the hardcore gamer, but the general community as a whole. Japan already has that. They have that in their culture.
My name is Christopher Laporte. I am a Las Vegas local for about 6 years now. We are opening up the Insert Coins Video Lounge Game Bar. I basically spent about a year trying to get the capital to make this happen. And everyone I talked to thought I was basically out of my mind. I said I wanted to open up a bar with video games in it and arcade cabinets, and people looked at me, why would you do that? Games are for kids. The fear was arcades died. So why would you try to resuscitate that business model?
The arcade business model isn't perfect. In fact, we have seen several arcades close in Japan in recent years. But for every arcade that closes, 2 new ones open up.
A lot of the news of arcade closures in Japan has been from these mom and pop arcades, because you never hear about a Taito Station closing or, a Club Sega closing. You hear about them opening new stores. Like, they just opened a 3rd Sega in Akihabara right next to the train station.
ビデオゲームとカードゲームがドッキングしたカードゲームのカテゴリーが生まれ、新しいカテゴリーが生まれることが相乗効果によって一番トップの売り上げを作れたんだと思う。
New game types always cause a mini resurgence in arcade popularity. And the goal of arcade companies in Japan is to continually evolve their offerings, drawing in new and larger audiences with modern gaming experiences.
数字レベニュー的なゴールはいくらでもあるんですけど、多分それはあんまり面白くないと思う。それよりはアーケードゲームの楽しみたいな遊びたいなっていう人をやっぱり増やしていかなきゃいけないのがうちの会社の、最終ゴールだと思ってます。ですからゲームの不安を徹底的に増やしていく、そういうことに全力で頑張りたいと思います。
日本の今、日本のアニメとか漫画は結構海外に流出してるんですが、アーケードゲームもまだ流出してないけれどもそれほど、それと匹敵するほど面白い文化だと思うので、ぜひ一度来てですね、この濃いアニメの世界に負けない濃い世界を味わってもらえたらいいんじゃないかと思います。家で一人でゲームやるのとは違う、そこで世界が垣間見れます。ぜひいらしてください。
Gaming is for the casual, it's for the passerby, or it's for the curious. It's for, someone who's absolutely just obsessed. It doesn't matter. It's a hobby, it's a passion, it's a sport, call it what you will. Video gaming isn't going away.
Might be cliche, but the American dream, it's right behind me. I had a vision of something that most people said I was crazy. An arcade is not going to work in the States. And to that I say, you're wrong. The arcades are coming back, they're coming back big. And it's just a different version of it, but it still entails the same thing. It's a place to play video games, have fun with your friends. I think the Japanese might get some inspiration from us in the way we have our console gaming. You know, the way we have the presentation of gaming in terms of an adult entertainment with drinking and, you know, cocktail servers and just upping the ante of what an arcade should be. It's that culture that we're tapping into. So I think it's viable anywhere as long as you have 30-somethings. You know, we were raised on it. I can't stress it enough. It was taboo maybe 30 years ago, but it sure as hell isn't now. And I'm just proud to be part of it. You know, we can make the arcade scene totally return to form of what they used to be in terms of popularity, but even bigger. You have to come and see it to believe it. The Americans they're back. And we'll get you at EVO too, Japanese. You're going down, Daigo.
So we are at EVO 2011, the World Finals, and it's just an amazing gathering of players from, I believe the count is 46 countries here this year. Obviously players from everywhere in North America, all over Asia, Europe, South America. Really the world's fighting elite and their fans and their competitors, the next generation of fighting elite, are all here in this room.
We started about 14 years ago in an arcade with 64 people. And we ran a Super Street Fighter 2 tournament, and it just snowballed over the years and bigger, and when Street Fighter 4 hit, thousands of people, and then now it's just out of control. So we took Togeki and what they did with arcades, we merged it with our stuff with console, and now we got a huge event, and I think we got the best of both worlds.
EVO がやっぱり一番それに向けて練習もするし、一番勝ちたい大会だし、一番盛り上がるし、楽しい好きな大会ですね。
I think the secret's out. EVO is like the place to be every year. It's a world championship, so they want to be the world champion. They're going to keep sending more and more players to take out our players, so it's pretty scary, like when our U.S. players can't even compete anymore.
Yeah, we've seen a massive Japanese presence here. We have a great connection with all the international players, really respect what they do. But we see a lot of these guys ending up at the top of the tournaments, and it's no special magical Japanese ability. They're coming from really one of the ultimate crucibles of fighting game competition.
For a 1,600-man tournament, if you come with like, you know, maybe, I think there were like 12 or something, to have from 12 guys, you know, a third of you make it all the way, that's pretty impressive.
It shows more, I guess, international rivalry, because obviously if you come to America, the Americans probably want to beat the Japanese players mainly. So we're doing pretty good here and there, but the Japanese presence is definitely overwhelming this year.
And their dedication to the game, obviously in particular, Daigo Umehara, who's become a sponsored player and treats it very much like a job. He spends his time in the arcade, he does physical fitness routines just to stay in mental and physical shape, and has just a unique focus, and he's able to bring a real focus and ability. He really has followed a dream and said, this is what I'm good at in life, I'm going to find a way to make this work, and with the support of his sponsor, he's been able to make that happen, and you see the results speak for themselves. He's right at the top of the winner's bracket.
I want to say the safe money is on Daigo because he won 2 years in a row, so I'll go with the safe bet.
Unfortunately, Daigo fell just short of taking his third straight title, finishing in 4th place. And while the rest of the world did their best to compete, a newcomer from Japan stepped up to claim the World Street Fighter IV Championship. With half of the top 8 being from Japan, it's not hard to see the product of the arcades and their culture. This isn't just about gaming anymore. It's a way of life, and for some, a career. The evolution of arcade gaming, from the inception of Space Invaders through to fighting and rhythm games, has maintained one constant throughout. It is a cultural beacon that forms the foundation of social communities and eclectic subcultures. The worldwide impact of arcades and their culture can be seen in many facets of society, and while in some locales this culture has waned, we are seeing a strong, nostalgia-driven push to reignite the passion that Space Invaders first captured. Professional gaming is on the rise, and arcades have asserted themselves beyond that of a simple hobby. The feelings and emotions that exist within arcades are unique and should be celebrated. This is the arcade experience.
sayonara talking. Oh, it's been fun, but my credit card is getting refused. My bags are full of games we bought the JAA.